He said the wedding was off unless I signed my $300K house over to his parents. I thought he was joking. We were planning forever, not plotting theft. But his eyes, they were dead serious. I ignored the warning signs, the cold silences, the way his family compared me to his brother's perfect wife, the subtle pressure to join their legacy. Now, I saw it. This wasn't love. It was a business transaction, and I was the prize. I almost signed. Almost. Until I found out I wasn't the first woman he tried this with, and I wasn't going to be his next victim. When I first stepped into my new house, barefoot and alone, I cried. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, trembling kind that builds in the throat and dies behind closed lips. It wasn't just a house. It was mine. After years of couch surfing, of shared rooms in foster homes, of people telling me I was too much or not enough, I had built this from nothing. And then Jacob walked in, arms full of champagne, his eyes warm like sunlight, and said, "We made it, babe." I wanted to believe him. He had this way of making everything feel soft, safe, like I wasn't doing life alone anymore, like I didn't have to be in survival mode 24/7. He cooked me breakfast in the mornings. He rubbed my feet when I got home from back-to-back showings, and when I asked him why he never talked about money, he smiled and said, "I don't want your money, Maddie. I want you." I met his family a few weeks later. They were polite, polished, and just a little too perfect. His mother, Evelyn, wore pearls to brunch. His father, Charles, shook my hand like I was interviewing for a job. And then there was Anna, his brother's wife. Sweet, compliant Anna, who seemed to know exactly when to speak and when to disappear. "You're very independent," Evelyn said, eyeing me across the table. "It's refreshing, though I imagine that makes compromise a bit challenging?" I laughed, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. Over dinner, they talked about family values, about unity and legacy, about how they hoped Jacob would finally settle down with someone who fits. His father asked how much I'd paid for the house. I lied and shaved 50 grand off the real price. Something about his expression made me regret even that. And then Evelyn said it. This place would make a lovely home, not just for you two, but for the whole family. It has that multi-generational charm. Jacob said nothing. He just smiled faintly and reached for the wine. I told myself it was harmless, just old-school thinking. But that night, in bed, I asked him why he didn't say anything, why he let her imply that my house could be our house, or worse, their house. He pulled me closer. "They don't mean anything by it. My mom just dreams big. Don't let it get to you." I tried to let it go. I tried so hard to keep seeing the man I fell in love with, the one who held my hand when I cried, who made grilled cheese like it was a Michelin meal, who whispered, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," when he thought I was asleep. But cracks began to show. When I brought up a prenup, casually, over takeout, he stiffened. "Do you really think I'm that kind of guy?" "I think we should both protect what we've built," I said gently. "It doesn't mean I don't love you." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I didn't grow up with a safety net like you, Maddie. I'm not looking to marry into money. I just want a partner who believes we're on the same team." And just like that, I felt ashamed for even suggesting it, like I'd violated some unspoken vow. Then came the family gathering. It was meant to be a casual Sunday lunch, just the 6 of us. But when I arrived, there were binders on the table, charts, papers. Evelyn launched into a speech about aligning financial vision and structuring future assets responsibly. Anna sat quietly, nodding, her hands folded like a perfect student. Nobody had told me this was happening. Nobody had asked. They spoke in riddles about legacy funds, generational equity, estate planning. Every sentence was dipped in sugar but burned going down. When I asked what exactly they were proposing, Charles smiled and said, "Just some family alignment. You're one of us now." I looked at Jacob. He looked at his plate. Later that night, I asked him why he didn't warn me. "I didn't know they were going to go that far," he said. "I thought it was just a lunch." "Do you think I should put the house in their name?" I asked, half joking. His silence stretched too long. "I think we need to show them we're serious," he finally said. That was when something inside me stirred, just faintly. A whisper of unease, a question I didn't want to answer. Was I in love, or was I being groomed? "You know," Jacob said one evening as we folded laundry together, "Anna sends money to my parents every month. Just, no questions asked. That's the kind of loyalty they admire." He said it casually, like it was a compliment, like it was a model I might consider emulating. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, something tensed. It wasn't the first time he'd mentioned Anna in that tone, admiring, wistful, like she'd figured out a secret formula I kept failing to grasp. The next week, I noticed things shifting, subtly, but undeniably. Jacob's texts became shorter, his affection more measured. At first, I chalked it up to stress, work, wedding planning. But then my best friend Naomi called, confused. "Hey, I thought you and Jacob were hosting that engagement dinner next week. Why wasn't I invited?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't even known the dinner was happening. When I asked Jacob, he brushed it off. It was just a last-minute thing my mom put together, mostly family. "But Naomi's practically family," he shrugged. "They just wanted to keep it simple. Except they kept making decisions without me, planning events I wasn't aware of, shaping a future that seemed to include me only when it was convenient. Naomi wasn't the only one edged out. Over the next few weeks, invitations stopped coming. Calls from mutual friends slowed. When I asked Jacob about it, he said, "Maybe they don't get us. Maybe they're jealous. Not everyone wants to see us win." He made it sound noble, romantic even. Us against the world. But it didn't feel like that. It felt like I was slowly being wrapped in plastic, suffocating one silent layer at a time. Then, one afternoon, I stopped by Jacob's family home unannounced, hoping to smooth things over. I needed to feel some sense of connection, some shared air. But as I approached the dining room, I heard Evelyn's voice through the half-closed door. "A real daughter-in-law knows how to give back, and if she won't, we'll find someone who will." There was silence. Then a soft chuckle. Jacob's brother. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. They hadn't seen me, but I'd heard enough. The next day, over brunch, Evelyn handed me a manila envelope with a practiced smile. "Just some financial alignment paperwork," she said. "A formality, something to ease the transition into family life." Inside was a property transfer form. It was blank, unsigned, but clear in intent. "We're thinking," she added, pouring more tea. "It would be easier to manage things if the house was under Charles and I for now, just until everything's settled." I looked at Jacob. He stared at his plate again. "We'll of course include a family agreement," Evelyn added, "to protect everyone's interests. It's about trust." I smiled tightly, nodded, and tucked the envelope into my bag. I didn't say a word. That night, Jacob finally spoke. "They just want to feel secure, Maddie. It's not a big deal. It's my house. It's our future, and if you trust me, if you trust us, you do this. If not," he paused, "then maybe we're not ready for marriage." He left the sentence there, hanging in the air like a knife suspended mid-swing. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I opened the envelope again, studying the form. Something about it felt too polished, too prepared, so I checked the metadata. The file had been created 6 months ago, before Jacob proposed. My chest constricted. I double-checked. It wasn't a copy-and-paste error. The document had been generated weeks before I'd even said yes to marrying him. They hadn't just hoped I'd say yes, they'd counted on it. I sat there frozen, realization crashing down like cold water. This wasn't some sudden request. This was a plan. Everything, his charm, the family's warmth, the casual comparisons to Anna, it had all been building toward this. I wasn't marrying into love. I was marrying into strategy, into legacy management, and I was the asset. I thought back to Evelyn's comment. "We'll find someone who will." What had that meant? Was I replaceable? Was I just step one? I wanted to confront Jacob right then. I wanted to scream, but something in me stopped. I needed more than anger. I needed proof. I needed clarity. Because if they were willing to groom me into giving everything away, what else were they hiding? It started with a random scroll through an old real estate blog. I was researching staging ideas for a client when a familiar face stopped me mid-swipe. The article featured a photo of a woman named Claire standing in front of a modest, charming house in the suburbs. She was smiling, hand on the front door, keys dangling from her fingers. Claire looked vaguely familiar. Something about her posture, her haircut, the warmth in her eyes. It pulled at me. I clicked the article. Claire, real estate professional, independent, self-made, newly engaged to an anonymous fiancé working in tech. And just like that, my blood ran cold. Jacob had mentioned an ex once, briefly. Said she couldn't handle commitment, never named her. But Claire looked too much like someone he would have chosen. I scoured her social media. She hadn't posted in nearly 2 years. But before she disappeared online, her last photo was of that same house, with the caption, "Our forever begins here." There was no wedding photo, no honeymoon, no ring announcement, just silence. Later that night, as I stared at my laptop, a message popped up from a private account. No name, no photo. "I don't know you, but I know him. Be careful. I was in your place once. He never marries. He collects." My heart seized. I wrote back immediately. "Who are you?" No response. I sent 3 more messages. Nothing. The account vanished within the hour. When I confronted Jacob the next day, I didn't even get to finish the sentence. He cut me off mid-question with a chuckle so bitter it almost sounded amused. "You think you're special?" he said, shaking his head. "You're just useful." It wasn't even the words. It was how casually he said them, like I'd been demoted from woman to appliance. Useful. I stood frozen in our kitchen, my mouth open but speechless. He brushed past me, grabbed his keys, and left like it was any other Tuesday. I don't remember how long I stood there. That night, I dug through our shared drawer, the one with receipts, post-its, miscellaneous junk, and pulled out a copy of our temporary marriage registration form. My name. His name. The notary's stamp. But something didn't sit right. I flipped the page, holding it up to the light. My signature was off. Not a little. A lot. It looked like it had been traced. Too smooth. Too perfect. The kind of precision no human hand makes naturally. I ran it through a PDF verifier. Scanned, pasted, digitally modified. I had never signed that form. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so violently I had to sit on them. I stared at the fake signature, the legally binding lie that could cost me everything, and all I could think was, how long had this been going on? Had I ever had a choice? The spiral came fast. I stopped eating. Sleep became something that happened in fragments, in gasps. I wandered through the house like a stranger, feeling the walls close in, feeling eyes on me even when I was alone. One night, I sat at the kitchen island and opened my laptop. I began drafting the email to Evelyn. I typed out the transfer terms, no lawyers, no prenup, just a smooth transition. I even wrote, "Consider this my gesture of goodwill." I hovered over send for 10 full minutes, and then something, some buried sliver of suspicion, made me log into my bank account. The balance wasn't right. I clicked through the history, a login from an unfamiliar IP, just a day prior, multiple export attempts of my financial statements, and a shared access approval. It wasn't Jacob. It was Anna. Her email. Her device ID. She'd gone in under the guise of helping Evelyn set up wedding logistics, but she'd accessed everything. I stared at the screen, breath trapped in my chest. They weren't just a family. They were a system. And I had walked in like a gift-wrapped donation. The feeling was hard to describe. Not fear, not betrayal, but something colder. Like discovering your reflection in a mirror had been watching you, not mimicking you. I shut the laptop. No tears came. I just sat in the dark, knowing I had to find a way out. But not quietly. I didn't cry after discovering the bank breach. I didn't scream or rage. I just sat still. Something inside me clicked, not like a snap, but like a lock sliding open. I wasn't broken. I was awake. It started the next morning. I Googled, aimlessly at first, financial manipulation in relationships, families who control through money, why love feels like pressure. And then I found it, a private online forum for women who had experienced financial abuse. I read post after post, women whose partners had slowly eroded their independence, who were told to trust the process, who gave and gave until nothing was theirs anymore. They spoke in code with trauma laced into every word, and yet their stories were mine. Same charm, same isolation, same betrayal. It wasn't a coincidence. I wasn't alone. One thread caught my eye. The title, Married into a Narcissistic Family, Lost Everything But Myself. The woman wrote about how her in-laws manipulated her into giving up her business for the good of the family, only to be discarded once her resources ran dry. She described love bombing, guilt spirals, sibling comparisons, passive-aggressive shaming masked as family concern. By the end of the post, I was shaking. It wasn't just Jacob. It was all of them. I searched deeper, terms I'd never used before. Narcissistic supply, enmeshment tactics, triangulation in family systems. Every paragraph felt like reading a manual they'd followed to the letter. And then came the rage. It didn't roar. It hissed, slow, hot, coiled deep in my gut. I'd spent my whole life chasing belonging. I thought if I worked hard enough, proved myself enough, someone, anyone, would finally say, "You're one of us." But it had always been conditional. Conditional love from foster homes, conditional attention from partners, conditional inclusion from Jacob's family. Now I understood. They never wanted me. They wanted what I represented: power, legitimacy, access. I was done begging to be seen. It was time they saw exactly what I could become when I stopped trying to please them. That afternoon, I got a call back from a lawyer I'd consulted weeks earlier, just as a precaution. His voice was calm, but his words weren't. "If you sign that transfer, you're surrendering all legal ownership. No strings attached. And if they push it further, they could build a case that you were mentally unstable or coercive in withholding it. You could lose more than the house." My stomach turned. "They've done this before," I whispered. "Then it's time you document everything." I hung up and stared out the window, and then I began to plan. The first step was information. I hired a private investigator, not a cheap one, a quiet one. Within days, he sent me files, bank records, archived social media, property transfers that never made headlines. But the real bombshell came wrapped in a single name: Anna. Her maiden name, her history, her connections. She wasn't just Jacob's sister-in-law. She was his ex. They had dated for nearly 2 years before she suddenly married Jacob's younger brother, the same brother who had mysteriously inherited a debt-free condo gifted by a family friend shortly after their wedding. It wasn't love. It was a structure. Anna and Jacob weren't passive players in the family system. They were architects. They moved through people like shadows, always with a smile, always with a plan. One seduced, the other legitimized. I stared at their engagement photos, Jacob holding me, Anna holding Jacob's brother, and saw it clear as glass. They'd done this before. They were doing it again, this time with me. But I wasn't going to vanish like Claire, or fold like some scared footnote. I drew out my plan on a whiteboard in the garage where no one would think to look. 3 tiers: legal, collect and secure every piece of documentation, voice memos, email trails, tampered contracts, IP logs from the bank breach, all time-stamped and backed up to cloud storage under a false account name. Public, prepare a version of the story for the world. Not bitter, not vengeful, strategic. A cautionary tale. One that made people listen. Personal, rebuild my foundation, talk to a therapist, reconnect with the friends I'd distanced, take back every inch of myself that had been slowly leased out in Jacob's name. And when I was ready, I'd burn their whole illusion to the ground, not with fire, with truth. I didn't announce it, I didn't make a scene. I just invited Jacob over for dinner, our old ritual. candlelight, wine, something baked in the oven. He smiled when he walked in, like the world had snapped back into place. "This feels nice," he said, brushing my cheek with the back of his hand. Like before. I poured him a drink. We sat, we ate. I asked about his work, his family, the wedding. Then I told him I'd thought about the house. His eyes flicked up. "I want to go through with it," I said softly. "The transfer. I understand now, it's not about the money. It's about trust." His entire posture changed, relaxed, smug. He leaned back, sipped his wine. "I knew you'd come around." I smiled and reached for my phone, placing it casually beside my plate. The screen was black, but it was recording every word. I asked questions I already knew the answers to, about the documents, about Anna, about when they'd started discussing the transfer. He answered them all, confidently, incriminatingly. By the end of dinner, I had 32 minutes of clean audio, proof of coercion, proof of intent, and something else, an admission. "She was never supposed to make this hard," he said, referring to me, eyes on his glass. We had it lined up, smooth, like last time. That night, I uploaded the file to 3 encrypted drives and emailed them to my lawyer, my therapist, and my closest friend. Then I got to work. I compiled everything: screenshots, emails, legal forms, voice notes. I drafted a blog post titled "I Was Almost Their Next Target" and published it to my real estate network newsletter. I sent the story, with redacted names and verifiable timestamps, to several women's advocacy forums. I emailed select real estate associations and legal partners I'd worked with, people who respected me, who knew I wasn't the kind to cause a stir unless it mattered. It didn't take long. Within 24 hours, the post was reposted across LinkedIn, Reddit, and TikTok. Other women came forward, some anonymous, some not. Similar stories, similar tactics. A disturbing pattern. They weren't just a family, they were a system of exploitation. And I had pulled back the curtain. Jacob showed up at my door 2 days later, face pale, breathing hard. "You think this is funny?" he hissed. "You're ruining everything." I pressed record on my phone without looking. "You threatened me," I said. "You tried to steal my home. What did you think would happen?" His fists clenched. "You're going to regret this." I smiled. "Did you think I didn't factor that in?" He stared at me, silent. Then he left. By the end of the week, it wasn't just blog posts, it was investigations. Anonymous tips had been submitted to the IRS and the state bar. Records surfaced linking Jacob and Anna to multiple arranged property transfers, all just below the legal threshold to trigger scrutiny. Except now, they were being re-examined as a coordinated scheme. Then came the twist I never expected. Jacob's younger brother, quiet, loyal, naive, walked into a law firm with a thumb drive. He had recordings, hours of dinner conversations, planning sessions, financial plotting. Even a heated exchange where Evelyn bragged, "It's not stealing if they give it willingly." He'd kept them for years. Why? Because deep down, he hated it too. He told the lawyer he was tired of being part of it, tired of the games, tired of pretending his marriage wasn't just another pawn on their board. With his testimony, the entire structure began to crumble. Investigators moved fast. The family's business accounts were frozen, their real estate licenses suspended. The press caught wind. Articles ran with headlines like, "The real estate family with a dark side and power couple," or "Predators." Jacob lost everything. He tried to push back, claimed slander, defamation, but no one listened. His silence in court said more than any denial could. And Anna? She vanished, closed accounts, deleted profiles. Rumor had it she left the country, but it didn't matter anymore, because their empire had fallen. And the final blow? The very person who had helped them conceal the abuse had exposed it all, their own blood, their loyal player, their golden boy. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no dancing, just breath, just space, just peace. The cabin was small, tucked in the folds of Vermont's quietest woods, and smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Madeline had found it through a private listing, a place no one else had touched in years. She bought it in cash, changed her number, and packed only what mattered: a suitcase, a laptop, a few pieces of art she couldn't let go of, and the truth. The first morning there, she didn't set an alarm. She brewed coffee barefoot, wrapped herself in a thick sweater, and watched snow fall in slow spirals through the window. Silence stretched around her, not heavy but sacred. For the first time in years, she didn't owe anyone her time, her trust, or her peace. That week, she began to write. The book poured out like breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The soft war, that's what she called it. Not because the battle had been gentle, but because it had been invisible, subtle, coded in smiles and passive words, masked as love and legacy. A war not of fists, but of contracts, not of bruises, but of erasure. She wrote about what it meant to lose autonomy piece by piece, about the danger of love when wielded as leverage, about the way families, when built on hierarchy and fear, could mimic cults in designer suits. The chapters went viral before the manuscript was even finished. Her podcast, launched almost by accident, had begun as a way to read excerpts aloud, but soon thousands tuned in weekly. Survivors sent in their stories. Experts asked to collaborate. A listener from Sweden sent her hand-knit socks. A woman from Argentina wrote, "You saved me from saying yes to a man like him." Then came the email from the publisher. They wanted to option the soft war into a series, 6 episodes, based on real events, based on her. Madeline stared at the screen for a long time. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay hidden. But another part, older now, steady, understood something critical. Telling her story had never been about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative. She replied yes. The next morning, as she checked emails, she saw a name that made her breath catch. Anna. The subject line was blank. The message short. "I didn't think you'd ever find out. I'm sorry, for all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I was never the one in charge." Madeline didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because some stories don't need epilogues. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Instead, she recorded a video. She sat on the cabin's porch, wrapped in a shawl, no makeup, no script. Just her voice. "Forgiveness doesn't mean return," she said. "It means release. It means choosing your peace over their penance." The clip was shared 1,000,000 times within a week. From there, she built more than content. She built community. Workshops called Financial Boundaries in Love became her signature series. Women and men sat in circles, virtual and in person, learning how to say no without apology, how to spot manipulation disguised as romance, how to walk away with dignity, not shame. She started a second podcast, named it Chosen Family. Its tagline, "Family is not DNA, it's safety." Each episode opened with a question: who taught you love meant sacrifice? She never mentioned Jacob or his family by name again. She didn't have to. The world had already seen the shape of their shadow, and the light that rose in its wake. On the 1-year anniversary of the blog post, she hosted a live stream. People called in from across the globe. One woman shared that she'd divorced her husband after years of economic coercion. A man admitted he'd manipulated his partner once and had spent the year in therapy undoing what he'd done. That night, Madeline sat alone by the fire. Snow whispered against the window pane. She thought of who she used to be. The woman begging to be chosen, the woman trying to make herself small enough to fit into someone else's mold. She thought of Claire, of the anonymous message, of the women who hadn't escaped. Then she thought of the girl she used to be in foster care, the one who learned early that survival required silence. And she whispered to her, "We're not quiet anymore." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering snow in soft gusts. Madeline looked out at the woods, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and smiled. No one could take this from her now. Not her peace, not her voice, not her home.